Chen had been cataloging soil samples from the Amazon when the emergency alert blared through his research station's communication system. Three sharp tones.
This is an emergency broadcast system test.
All citizens report to designated coalition integration centers
This
is not a drill.
Journey back to
This
Seattle took
is not
14
a
hours,
drill.
giving Marcus plenty of time to
journey
worry.
back to Seattle took 14
The Galactic
hours,
Coalition had made
giving Marcus
contact.
plenty
Earth
of time
18
to
months
worry.
ago, and while the
Galactic
initial meetings
Coalition
had gone
made
well,
contact with Earth
there had been
18 months ago,
whispers of
and while the
additional
initial meetings had gone well, there had been whispers of additional requirements for membership, requirements that Earth's governments had been suspiciously quiet about. The Integration Center occupied what used to be the Seattle Convention Center, now retrofitted with technology that hurt to look at directly. Crystalline structures grew from the walls like frozen lightning, pulsing with soft blue light that somehow translated alien languages directly into human minds. Marcus joined the queue of confused and nervous humans, all clutching the same standard-issue translation device. "Next!" called a voice that sounded like music being played backward. Marcus stepped forward and found himself face-to-face with his first Etherian. Zarathel stood nearly 8 feet tall, her skin appearing to be made of living crystal that shifted between deep purple and silver, depending on the angle of light. 4 arms moved with fluid grace, each ending in hands with 6 delicate fingers. Her face was elongated and elegant, with 6 eyes arranged in 2 rows across her forehead, each one a different shade of blue. "You are Marcus Chen, designation 7749, Alpha, Sol 3, she said, consulting a device that looked like liquid metal flowing between her fingers. Born October 15, 1995. Xenobiologist specializing in extremophile organisms. No current romantic attachments, parents deceased. 1 sister, currently residing in Vancouver, Canada. That's remarkably thorough, Marcus said, trying not to stare at the way her eyes moved independently, tracking different points around the room while she spoke to him. The Coalition maintains comprehensive databases on all sentient species within member systems, Zarathel explained. It is necessary for the bonding protocol. Marcus felt his stomach drop. The what protocol? Zarathel's expression shifted slightly, what might have been surprise on a human face. You were not informed? This is unusual. She gestured with 2 of her hands while the other 2 operated her device. Please, sit. This conversation requires proper context. The chair that materialized from the floor was perfectly sized for him, adjusting its shape as he settled into it. Zarathel remained standing, which Marcus realized was probably more comfortable for her physiology. The Galactic Coalition has maintained peace for 3,247 of your Earth years, she began, her voice taking on what sounded like a formal cadence. This peace is not maintained through military might or economic pressure, but through the bonding protocol. Each adult member of every species within the Coalition is paired with an adult from a different species. These bonds create familial ties that make conflict between species psychologically and socially impossible. Marcus stared at her. You're talking about marriage, the closest human equivalent. Yes. Though Etherian bonding encompasses emotional, intellectual, and what you might call spiritual dimensions that human marriage traditionally does not address.
Zarathel sat across from him, her crystalline skin catching the light and throwing rainbow patterns on the walls.
I have been assigned as your bond partner. Assigned? Marcus repeated the word like it tasted strange. Not chosen, not introduced, assigned. The selection process is extraordinarily sophisticated, Zarathel said, and Marcus caught something in her tone that might have been defensiveness. Psychological profiles, genetic compatibility assessments, intellectual resonance patterns, emotional spectrum mapping, even analysis of dream patterns and subconscious preference indicators. The algorithm has achieved a 97.3% success rate across all tested species combinations. Success rate for what? Long-term bond satisfaction, reproductive success where biologically possible, mutual intellectual stimulation, and what your species calls happiness. Zaratel's 6 eyes focused on him with an intensity that made Marcus feel like she was reading his thoughts. The remaining 2.7% typically involves individuals who refuse to participate in the process. Marcus stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that looked out over Seattle's skyline. Alien ships hung in the air like silver teardrops, and construction crews made up of a dozen different species were already modifying buildings to accommodate various physiological needs. And, if I refuse, both our species face immediate expulsion from the Coalition. Earth would lose access to Coalition technology, trade networks, and protection. Your planet would be classified as a hostile, isolationist world. Zarathel's voice remained calm, but Marcus heard an undercurrent of something else. Concern? My people would face similar consequences. The Etherian Collective has been part of the Coalition for over 2 millennia. Expulsion would be devastating. Marcus turned back to face her. So, I don't actually have a choice. You have the same choice every adult in the Coalition has had for 3,000 years, Zarathel said quietly. The choice to trust that sometimes the most beneficial path forward requires accepting something unfamiliar. There was something in the way she said it that made Marcus look at her more carefully. You sound like you're speaking from experience. For the first time, Zarathel's formal composure cracked slightly. This is my first bonding assignment as well. The algorithms determined that pairing 2 individuals experiencing the process simultaneously would create optimal bonding conditions. She paused, her Seek's eyes focusing on different points around the room before settling back on him. I am as uncertain as you are. Marcus found himself studying her face, trying to read expressions that had evolved on an entirely different world. What happens now? We have 72 hours to complete the initial bonding ceremony. During this time, we are encouraged to learn about each other, establish communication patterns, and develop the foundation for a long-term partnership. Zarathel gestured toward a doorway that hadn't been there moments before. We have been assigned shared quarters in the integration center where we can conduct this process. Shared quarters. Marcus ran a hand through his hair.
Of course.
Marcus Chen, Zarathel said, standing and moving toward the doorway with that fluid grace that suggested her people had evolved in lower gravity. I understand this situation is difficult. It is difficult for me as well. My species typically engages in courtship rituals lasting several years before bonding. This acceleration is challenging. Something in her tone made Marcus pause. What are your people like? I mean, besides the obvious physical differences. Zarathel stopped at the doorway, turning back to him. We are crystalline-based life forms, from a world with 3 suns and 7 moons. Our skin photosynthesize certain spectrums of light, which is why we appear to change color. We typically live for approximately 800 of your years, reach intellectual maturity around age 50, and form deep, lifelong bonds with small groups of individuals, rather than maintaining large social networks. She paused, seeming to consider something. We also have perfect memory recall and the ability to share sensory experiences directly through physical contact, which makes deception virtually impossible between bonded individuals. This is considered both a blessing and a significant responsibility. Marcus felt his xenobiologist training kick in, genuine curiosity beginning to override his anxiety. Shared sensory experiences. Perhaps a demonstration would be more useful than explanation, Zarathel said, extending one of her 4 hands toward him. If you are willing. Marcus hesitated for a moment, then reached out to touch her crystalline skin. The moment their hands made contact, the world exploded into new sensation. He could suddenly see the room through 6 different perspectives simultaneously, each eye processing different spectrums of light. The sterile integration center became a symphony of infrared heat patterns, ultraviolet communication signals from alien technology, and electromagnetic fields that painted the air in colors he had no names for. But more than that, he could sense Zaratel's emotional state directly. Nervousness, curiosity, hope, and underneath it all, a deep loneliness that resonated with something in his own heart. The connection lasted only seconds before Zaratel pulled her hand back, but the impact left Marcus staggered. That was, he began, then realized he didn't have words. Overwhelming, yes. It requires practice to maintain during longer contact. Zarathel's skin shifted to deeper purples, which Marcus somehow intuited meant embarrassment. I apologize. I should have warned you more thoroughly. Don't apologize, Marcus said quickly. That was incredible. I could see, I could feel. He paused, trying to process the experience. You're lonely. Zarathel's skin color shifted again, this time to what looked like surprise. The emotional resonance was unexpected. Typically, first contact requires several attempts before feelings transfer successfully. Maybe your algorithm knows what it's doing, Marcus said, surprising himself at the words. They stood looking at each other for a long moment, the weight of their situation settling between them. Finally, Zarathel spoke. Perhaps we should see these quarters. We have much to learn about each other in a very short time. As they walked through the doorway, Marcus couldn't shake the memory of that moment of connection, the way his loneliness had seemed to recognize hers across the vast difference between their species. Maybe this impossible situation wasn't just about political necessity. Maybe, just maybe, it was about something much more fundamental about the nature of intelligent life in the universe. The corridor they entered was lined with doors, each marked with different species identifications. Through some doors, Marcus could hear conversations in languages that sounded like singing, arguing, or sounds that had no human equivalent. They weren't the only ones going through this process. "How many species are in the coalition?" he asked as they walked. "Currently, 47 primary species and over 300 subspecies variants," Zarathel replied. Each adult individual bonded to someone from a different species group. It creates a web of interconnection that makes large-scale conflict impossible, but smaller conflicts? Individual disagreements, yes, but when your bond partner's cousin is from the species you're considering conflict with, and their bond partner's family includes representatives from a dozen other worlds, the complexity of maintaining hostile relationships becomes, she searched for a word, prohibitive. They stopped at a door marked with symbols that somehow translated directly into Chen Zarathel Bonding Suite 247. Zarathel pressed her palm against a crystal panel, and the door dissolved like mist. The room beyond was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. The space was large and filled with natural light from windows that somehow showed both Earth's sky and what appeared to be an alien landscape with purple vegetation and twin suns. The furniture seemed to shift and adapt as they entered, creating spaces suitable for both human and Etherian physiology. The accommodation systems analyze our preferences and create hybrid environments, Zarathel explained, noting his amazed expression.
Over the next 72 hours, it will continue to adapt as it learns our combined preferences. Marcus walked to one of the windows showing the alien landscape. Is that your world?
Yes. Etheria Prime, my birthplace. Zarathel joined him at the window, standing close enough that he could feel the subtle warmth radiating from her crystalline skin.
Do you find it beautiful? Marcus studied the purple forests, the twin suns casting everything in warm golden and cool silver light simultaneously, the crystalline formations that rose like natural skyscrapers from the landscape.
It's incredible.
I've studied extremophile environments my whole career, but nothing like this. And this is Earth? Zarathel moved to the other window, which showed the Seattle skyline with Mount Rainier in the distance.
My home?
Marcus confirmed.
What do you think?
Zarathel stood quietly for several minutes, her 6 eyes tracking across the view. So much green, so much water. The single sun creates such different shadows than I am accustomed to. But yes, I think it is beautiful. Different from Etheria, but beautiful. As evening approached on both worlds simultaneously, Marcus realized that despite the impossibility of their situation, he was beginning to feel something he hadn't expected. Genuine curiosity about this being who had been assigned to share his life. The day had started with panic and ended with wonder. Tomorrow, they would begin the real work of learning whether an algorithm could truly predict something as complex as love between species separated by millions of years of evolution. Tonight, Marcus found himself cautiously optimistic about finding out. Marcus woke to the sound of crystalline harmonics, a melody that seemed to resonate through the walls themselves. For a moment, he forgot where he was. Then memory crashed back. The integration center. The bonding protocol. Zarathel. He sat up in the bed that had somehow molded itself perfectly to his body during the night and looked around the suite. Zarathel stood by the window showing Etheria Prime, her forearms moving in complex patterns while that haunting melody continued. Her crystalline skin caught the morning light from both Earth's sun and Etheria's twin suns, creating rainbow patterns that danced across the walls. "Good morning," Marcus said quietly, not wanting to interrupt what seemed like a private moment. The melody stopped, and Zarathel turned toward him. "Good morning, Marcus Chen. I apologize if my morning resonance patterns disturbed your sleep cycle." Quote, "Not disturbed. It was beautiful." "Is that music?" "Something similar to what you would call music, yes. It is how Etherians process emotional states and prepare for daily activities. Your species uses coffee, we use harmonic resonance." Zarathel's skin shifted to lighter purples, which Marcus was beginning to recognize as her equivalent of a smile. "Though I admit, after accessing Earth's cultural databases last night, I find myself curious about this coffee." Marcus couldn't help but grin. "Now that's something I can help with." The suite's accommodation system had apparently been busy during the night. What looked like a hybrid kitchen area had appeared along one wall, complete with what appeared to be a coffee machine designed for beings with 4 arms. Marcus approached it cautiously. The system analyzed your dietary preferences and sleeping patterns while you rested, Zarathel explained. It determined that you consume this beverage each morning as part of your routine. Every morning for the past 15 years, Marcus confirmed, examining the alien coffee machine. It looked familiar enough to be usable, but different enough to be slightly intimidating. What do you normally consume in the morning? Light. Specifically, the spectrum produced by Etheria's twin suns during the transition period between night and day. Zarathel gestured toward the window. The accommodation system has attempted to replicate the correct spectrum, but it is not quite accurate. Marcus looked at her more carefully, noticing that her skin seemed slightly duller than it had yesterday. Are you not feeling well? I am hungry, I suppose you would say. My people require specific light spectrums for optimal health, just as yours require food. The system is adequate for survival, but not ideal for thriving. Zarathel moved closer to the Earth window, where morning sunlight streamed through. Your sun's spectrum is quite different from what I am accustomed to. An idea struck Marcus. What if we went outside? Real sunlight might be better than the simulation. Zarathel's 6 eyes focused on him with surprise. You would accompany me for light feeding? Of course. We're supposed to be learning about each other, right? Besides, I could use some fresh air, and there's a great coffee shop just outside the integration center. 20 minutes later, they walked through the streets of Seattle together, drawing stares from humans and aliens alike. Marcus had expected to feel self-conscious, but instead found himself fascinated by Zarathel's reactions to Earth's environment. She stopped at every plant they passed, examining leaves and flowers, with an intensity that made other pedestrians give them a wide berth. Her skin grew brighter and more vibrant in the natural sunlight, shifting through colors Marcus was learning to associate with curiosity and wonder. Your planet has remarkable biodiversity, she said, gently touching the bark of a street tree. Etheria's plant life is primarily crystalline-based, but these carbon-based organisms are fascinating. They process light so differently than my people do.
You said your skin photosynthesizes.
How does that work exactly? Zarathel held up one of her hands, spreading her 6 fingers to catch the morning light. My skin contains crystalline matrices that convert specific light wavelengths directly into energy. But unlike your plants, which process light chemically, we process it experientially. Light has emotional qualities for us. Warm light feels joyful, cool light feels contemplative, red light can be aggressive or passionate depending on intensity. Marcus watched the play of colors across her skin as they walked. So when your skin changes color, you're not just showing emotion, you're processing the emotional content of the light around you? Precisely. Zarathel looked at him with what he was learning to recognize as approval. You understand quickly. This is why the bonding algorithm matched us, I believe. Your training in xenobiology allows you to think beyond human-centric assumptions. They reached the coffee shop, a small place that had been Marcus's regular stop before his Amazon assignment. The owner, Mrs. Chen, no relation despite the name, looked up as they entered and did a double-take at Zarathel. Marcus! And you must be... She paused, clearly uncertain how to address an 8-foot crystalline alien. Zarathel of the Etherian Collective, Zarathel said, inclining her head in what seemed to be a formal greeting. I am honored to meet a member of Marcus's community.
Mrs.
Chen beamed. Well, aren't you polite? What can I get for you both? The usual for me, Marcus said. And for Zarathel. He looked at his assigned partner questioningly. I do not consume liquids in the manner of your species, Zarathel said carefully. However, I am curious about the social aspects of this ritual.
Mrs.
Chen, who Marcus was learning had adapted to the new world with remarkable ease, nodded thoughtfully. You know, I've got some of those new spectrum lights they installed for the Heliophage delegation last week. Would you like to try some artificial sunlight varieties while Marcus has his coffee? Zarathel's skin brightened noticeably. That would be most kind. As they settled into a corner booth modified to accommodate various alien physiologies, Marcus found himself relaxing for the first time since arriving at the integration center. Zarathel positioned herself under a bank of lights that cycled through different spectrums, her skin responding with subtle color changes that Marcus was beginning to read like expressions. This is pleasant, she said, her voice carrying a contentment that her earlier formal tone had lacked. The light has a quality I have not experienced before. It is hopeful. That's Seattle morning light, Marcus said, sipping his coffee. I've missed it. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, Marcus drinking his coffee while Zarathel absorbed light and observed the humans and aliens moving through the coffee shop. Finally, she spoke.
Marcus Chen, may I ask you something personal? I think personal questions are kind of required at this point. Why were you alone? The bonding algorithm noted that you have had no romantic attachments for 3 years, and before that only short-term relationships.
For a species as social as humans, this seems unusual. Marcus considered the question, swirling his coffee. I suppose I never found anyone who understood why I'd rather spend months in a jungle studying microorganisms than go to parties or watch movies. My work was always more interesting than dating. You preferred the company of non-human life forms to human ones? I preferred the company of life forms that didn't expect me to be someone other than who I am, Marcus said, then stopped, realizing what he'd just revealed. Zarathel's skin shifted to deeper blues, which he was learning indicated thoughtfulness. This may explain our compatibility rating. Etherians typically form bonds with individuals who complement our essential nature rather than challenge it to change. Your algorithm profile indicated someone who would appreciate an intellectual partnership over emotional drama. What about you? Marcus asked. Have you ever been bonded before? No. Among my people, bonding typically occurs after several years of courtship, during which time we share progressively deeper mental connections. I have engaged in preliminary courtships, but none progressed to bonding. Zaratel's skin shifted to colors Marcus couldn't quite interpret. I was considered too curious about other species, too interested in experiences beyond traditional Etherian culture. So we're both the aliens even among our own people. An interesting observation. Zarathel's colors shifted to what Marcus was learning indicated amusement. Perhaps the algorithm recognized that we would understand each other's outsider status. Marcus finished his coffee, watching Zarathel absorb the artificial sunlight with obvious enjoyment. Can I ask you something now? Of course. Yesterday, when we touched hands, I felt something from you. Loneliness, but also something else. Something like recognition? Zaratel was quiet for a long moment, her skin cycling through colors Marcus couldn't read. Finally, she extended one of her hands across the table. Perhaps I should show you rather than tell you. Marcus hesitated only briefly before taking her hand. Once again, the world exploded into new sensations, but this time Zarathel seemed to be controlling the connection more carefully. Instead of overwhelming sensory input, Marcus found himself experiencing something more like memories. He saw himself through her eyes, first as data on a screen, psychological profiles, genetic markers, behavioral patterns, then her surprise when the algorithm had matched them, her nervousness about bonding with a non-Etherian, her fear that the cultural differences would make real connection impossible. But underneath those concerns, he sensed something deeper, a recognition of kindred spirit, someone who understood what it felt like to be fascinated by the unknown. Someone who chose curiosity over comfort. Someone who had spent their life studying life forms utterly different from themselves, because those differences were beautiful rather than threatening. When the connection ended, Marcus sat back, shaken by the depth of what he'd experienced. You felt it too, Zarathel said quietly. The recognition.
Yeah, I did.
Marcus looked at her, this impossible being who had been assigned to him by an algorithm, and felt something shift in his chest. How long do most species take to complete the bonding process? It varies. Some pairs bond immediately upon meeting. Others use the full 72-hour period. A few require extension periods, though these are rare. Zarathel's skin shifted to questioning blues. Why do you ask? Marcus stood up, extending his hand to her again. Because I think we should go back to the integration center. Not because we have to, but because I want to learn more about what that connection means. Zaratel took his hand, and this time the touch was gentle, warm, filled with curiosity and something that might have been the beginning of genuine affection. I would like that as well. As they walked back through the Seattle streets, Marcus realized that somewhere between yesterday's panic and this morning's coffee, something fundamental had changed. This wasn't just about planetary politics or diplomatic necessity anymore. This was about two beings who had spent their lives feeling like outsiders in their own species, discovering that maybe, just maybe, they could find home with each other. The next 48 hours would determine whether that possibility could become reality. For the first time since receiving the emergency alert, Marcus found himself eager to find out. Back at the integration center, they discovered that their suite had continued to evolve during their absence. The space now included what appeared to be a laboratory setup, complete with microscopes, specimen containers, and analysis equipment that looked like it could handle both Earth-based and alien biology samples.
The system analyzed our conversation patterns and personal interests, Zarathel explained, moving toward the equipment with obvious excitement. It appears we share an interest in biological research. You're a scientist too? Xenobiologist, actually. I specialize in carbon-based lifeform adaptation patterns. Zarathel's skin shifted to bright golds and silvers, colors Marcus was learning to associate with excitement. I have been studying Earth's biodiversity remotely for several of your years. Your planet's lifeforms represent evolutionary pathways we have never encountered. Marcus stared at her. You're kidding. I do not understand this expression. You're not serious. You can't be serious. I am entirely serious. Why would this surprise you? Marcus sat down heavily in one of the adaptive chairs. Because I've spent my entire career studying extremophile organisms and dreaming about what alien life might look like. And you've spent your career studying Earth biology and wondering about carbon-based life forms. We're literally each other's research interests. Zarathel's 6 eyes focused on him with an intensity that made him feel like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. The algorithm is more sophisticated than either of us realized. Way more sophisticated. They spent the rest of the day in the laboratory, sharing their research, comparing methodologies, and discovering that their different perspectives on biology created insights neither had achieved alone. Marcus learned about crystalline-based life forms that processed energy through harmonic resonance and reproduced through light pattern exchanges. Zarathel marveled at Earth's carbon-based biochemistry and the incredible diversity of evolutionary adaptations. As evening approached, they found themselves working side by side on a comparison study of extremophile bacteria from Earth and crystalline microorganisms from Etheria. Every time their hands brushed while sharing equipment, the brief connection revealed depths of intellectual excitement and growing personal interest that surprised them both. Marcus, Zarathel said as they finished documenting their preliminary findings, I have a confession. What's that? When I first received my bonding assignment, I accessed Earth's databases to learn about human bonding customs. I was concerned that the physical and cultural differences between our species would make genuine connection impossible. Her skin shifted to colors Marcus was learning meant vulnerability. I prepared myself to fulfill the diplomatic requirements while maintaining emotional distance. Marcus set down the specimen container he'd been labeling. And now? Now I find myself hoping that 72 hours will be enough time to explore what we might become together, but simultaneously worried that it will not be nearly enough time to understand all that you are. Marcus moved closer to her, close enough to see the intricate patterns of light that played constantly beneath her crystalline skin. Zarathel, can I tell you something? Always. I've never felt more understood by another being in my entire life. Yesterday I was terrified of losing my independence. Today I'm terrified of losing the chance to see where this leads. Zarathel extended all 4 of her hands toward him. Then perhaps we should find out together. Marcus took her hands, and this time the connection that flowed between them was filled not just with curiosity and recognition, but with the first tender threads of something much deeper. Something that might, given time and patience, become love. The alarm that woke Marcus on their final day was different from the previous mornings. Instead of the gentle chimes that had become familiar, this was a harmonic progression that seemed to resonate through his bones, calling every cell in his body to attention. He sat up to find Zarathel already standing by the window, her skin cycling through patterns he'd never seen before, complex geometries of color that seemed to tell a story. Today is bonding day, she said, without turning around. Marcus joined her at the window, noticing that both views, Earth and Etheria Prime, showed similar aurora-like phenomena painting the skies. Is that normal? The Coalition's bonding ceremonies create quantum resonance patterns that manifest visually across all connected worlds, Zarathel explained, her voice carrying a formality that hadn't been there for the past 2 days. Every pair bonding today contributes to the pattern. It is considered one of the most beautiful aspects of Coalition membership. Marcus studied the dancing lights, realizing that somewhere in those patterns was a representation of every interspecies couple across dozens of worlds choosing to bind their lives together. How many pairs are bonding today? Approximately 40,000 across all Coalition worlds. Earth's integration includes over 3 million individuals, so this ceremony will continue for several months until all compatible pairs have completed the process. Zarathel turned to face him, her 6 eyes holding an expression Marcus had learned to recognize as nervous anticipation.
We are among the first which the Coalition considers auspicious. Lucky us, Marcus said, then immediately regretted the flippant tone as Zarathel's skin shifted to colors he associated with concern.
Marcus, are you having doubts about the bonding? The question hung in the air between them, weighted with 2 days of growing connection and the understanding that their answer would affect not just their personal lives, but the diplomatic relationships between their species. Marcus considered his response carefully.
Doubts about the politics and pressure? Absolutely.
Doubts about you? He moved closer to her, close enough to see the intricate crystalline patterns beneath her skin. None at all. Zarathel's skin shifted to warm golds, colors Marcus had learned meant relief and happiness.
I share your feelings. The situation remains
unprecedented. But you have become precious to me in ways I did not anticipate when the algorithm made its selection. A soft chime indicated an incoming communication. The wall nearest them became transparent, revealing the image of a being Marcus didn't recognize, tall and ethereal with skin that seemed to be made of flowing liquid, and eyes that held depths like oceans.
Greetings, Marcus Chen and Zarathel of Etheria. I am Confluence of Tides, your assigned bonding facilitator. The being's voice sounded like waves on a distant shore.
It is time to begin your ceremony preparation. Preparation? Marcus asked. Each species has traditional bonding customs that must be incorporated into coalition ceremonies. The process requires approximately 4 hours to complete properly, including individual preparation periods, community witnesses, and the formal bonding ritual itself. Zarathel stepped forward. What does human bonding tradition require? Confluence of Tides consulted what appeared to be flowing liquid between their fingers. Human bonding traditionally includes declaration of intent before community witnesses, exchange of symbolic objects representing commitment, and physical contact to seal the bond.
Etherian tradition requires harmonic resonance synchronization, crystal matrix bonding, and shared light feeding to establish the deep connection characteristic of your species' partnerships.
Marcus felt a flutter of panic. We don't have rings. Human bonding usually involves exchanged rings. This has been anticipated. Confluence of Tides said with what might have been amusement. The Coalition's integration teams have prepared appropriate symbolic objects for all species requirements. You will find them in your preparation chambers. The suite around them began to reconfigure, walls flowing like liquid to create separate spaces. Marcus found himself in a room that felt distinctly human, warm wood tones and soft lighting, with a view of Earth's sky where the aurora continued to dance. On a table in the center sat a small box that looked suspiciously like something from a jewelry store.
In the adjacent space, visible through crystalline walls, Zarathel stood in an environment that looked like it belonged on her homeworld, all flowing crystal formations and complex light patterns that made her skin shine with colors Marcus had never seen her display before.
Confluence of Tides appeared in both spaces simultaneously, somehow being present in multiple locations.
You have 1 hour for individual preparation and reflection. Use this time to consider the commitment you are making and prepare yourselves mentally for the bonding process. Alone for the first time in 2 days, Marcus opened the box on the table. Inside were 2 rings, but not like any he'd ever seen. They appeared to be made of the same material as Etherian skin, crystalline but warm to the touch, shifting colors as he moved them. Somehow, they fit perfectly on his finger, adjusting size automatically.
A gentle voice, not Confluence of Tides, but something that seemed to emerge from the room itself, began to speak.
Marcus Chen, you have reached the final stage of the bonding process.
Before you proceed, you must understand what this commitment entails. I'm listening. Bonding within the coalition is not simply a political arrangement or social contract. The process creates actual neurological and quantum connections between partners. You will share not only your life with Zarathal, but aspects of your consciousness, your emotional experiences, and your sensory perceptions. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. What does that mean exactly? Physical touch will continue to create the connection you have experienced, but the bond will deepen over time. Eventually, you will be able to sense her emotional state from great distances, share complex thoughts and memories, and even experience echoes of her sensory perceptions. This connection cannot be severed once established. Never? The bonding process is designed to create permanent connections that make conflict between species impossible. However, the depth and intensity of the connection varies based on the compatibility and willingness of the bonded pair. Marcus sat in one of the room's adaptive chairs trying to process the implications. And if we're not compatible? If this doesn't work,
The algorithm has never been incorrect in its compatibility assessments. However, the strength of the bond depends on both parties' commitment to the process. Shallow commitment creates superficial bonds sufficient for diplomatic requirements. Full commitment creates connections that coalition historians describe as the most profound relationships possible between sentient beings. Marcus thought about the past 2 days, the growing understanding between himself and Zariatel, the way their different perspectives had created insights neither could achieve alone. The fear that had dominated his first day at the Integration Center had been replaced by something he hadn't expected, genuine excitement about building a life with someone who understood his mind in ways no human ever had. Through the crystalline wall, he could see Zarathel standing in complex light patterns, her skin displaying colors and patterns that seemed to tell an entire story. As if sensing his attention, she turned toward him, their eyes meeting through the barrier between their spaces. Even without physical contact, Marcus felt something flow between them, a recognition and growing affection that made his decision clear. When Confluence of Tides reappeared, Marcus was ready.
Have you completed your reflection?
I have.
And your decision? Marcus looked toward Zarathel's preparation chamber, where she stood surrounded by light, more beautiful than anything his xenobiology training had ever prepared him to appreciate. Full commitment. The walls between their spaces dissolved, and Zarathel approached him, her skin cycling through patterns that told him she had made the same choice.
Full commitment, she said, extending all 4 hands toward him. Confluence of Tides gestured, and their suite expanded into something that defied the physical laws Marcus thought he understood. The space became vast, filled with representatives of dozens of species who appeared both physically present and somehow projected from distant locations. Human faces he recognized, including his sister from Vancouver, mixed with aliens whose physiology challenged his understanding of biological possibility. We gather to witness the bonding of Marcus Chen of Earth and Zarathel of Etheria. Confluence of Tides announced, their voice somehow reaching every being present. This union represents not only the joining of 2 individuals but the strengthening of connections between species, worlds, and ways of understanding existence. Marcus and Zarathel stood in the center of the vast space, hands joined, her crystalline skin warm beneath his touch. The connection between them flowed freely now, sharing nervous excitement, joy, and growing love that had surprised them both. Marcus Chen, Confluence of Tides, said, "Do you choose to bond with Zarathel, knowing that this connection will change the fundamental nature of your existence?" "I do," Marcus said, surprised by the steadiness of his own voice. Zarathel of Etheria, do you choose to bond with Marcus Chen, knowing that this connection will create new patterns in your crystalline matrix that cannot be undone?
"I choose bonding with absolute commitment," Zarathel replied, her voice carrying harmonic overtones that made Marcus's skin tingle.
"Then exchange the symbols of your commitment." Marcus slipped one of the crystalline rings onto Zarathel's finger, marveling at how it adapted to fit her 6-fingered hand perfectly. She placed the matching ring on his finger, and the moment both rings were in place, the world exploded into shared sensation. This time, instead of brief glimpses of her perceptions, Marcus found himself experiencing everything Zarathel was feeling. The joy radiating through her crystalline skin, the harmony of being surrounded by light from dozens of different worlds, the deep satisfaction of finding intellectual and emotional partnership with someone from a completely different evolutionary path. But more than that, he felt her love for him, pure and strong, and utterly unlike anything he'd ever experienced. It was love that celebrated his differences, rather than trying to change them. Love that found beauty in his curiosity about other life forms. Love that had grown from genuine appreciation of who he was, rather than who he might become. "Now share the light feeding," Confluence of Tides instructed. Zarathel guided Marcus to stand with her in a beam of light that combined spectrums from Earth's sun, Etheria's twin suns, and dozens of other stars. As she began to photosynthesize, Marcus felt the energy flowing through her system as if it were his own, warm and nourishing and filled with contentment. And complete the harmonic resonance. Zarathel began to sing, if it could be called singing. The sound resonated through Marcus's bones, creating harmonies with his own heartbeat and breathing patterns. Without knowing how, he found himself adding his own voice to hers, creating complex patterns of sound that seemed to tell the story of their meeting, their growing connection, and their commitment to building something together that neither could create alone. The ceremony space filled with light as representatives of dozens of species added their own harmonic contributions, creating a symphony that Marcus felt in every cell of his body. By the authority of the Galactic Coalition and the witnessed commitment of both parties,
Marcus Chen and Zaratel of Etheria are bonded. Confluence of tides announced. May your connection bring strength to both your species and joy to your individual existence. As the witnesses began to fade back to their distant locations, Marcus and Zarathil stood alone in their transformed suite, still holding hands, still sharing the deep connection that had been formalized but had begun days earlier. How do you feel? Zarathil asked, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated with his own emotions. Marcus considered the question, taking inventory of his physical and emotional state. He felt fundamentally changed, as if some empty space he hadn't known existed had been filled. The constant low-level loneliness that had been his baseline for years was gone, replaced by an awareness of Zarathil's presence that felt like coming home. Like myself, but more so, he said finally. Like I found the part of me I didn't know was missing. Zarathel's skin shifted through the colors he had learned meant deep happiness. The bonding was successful. I can feel your emotional state as clearly as my own. And it is, she searched for words, harmonious. They stood together in the soft light of their shared space, two beings from different worlds who had become something new together. Tomorrow would bring the challenge of building a life that honored both their species' needs. They would need to navigate the complexities of interspecies relationships, the political implications of their union, and the practical challenges of beings with different physiologies sharing daily existence. But tonight, surrounded by the gentle aurora of the Coalition's bonding ceremony and feeling the steady warmth of their connection, Marcus Chen and Zaratel of Etheria were simply two beings who had chosen to love across the vastness of space and time, and discovered that some bonds transcend the differences between species. 3 months after the bonding ceremony, Marcus stood in what had once been his small Seattle apartment, now transformed into something that defied architectural logic. The accommodation systems had been working continuously since Zarathil moved in, creating spaces that served both human and Etherian needs, while somehow maintaining the cozy feeling Marcus had always loved about his home. The living room now included crystal formations that provided the specific light spectrum Zarathil needed for optimal health, but they were integrated so naturally into the space that they looked like art installations rather than alien technology. Windows that had once shown only the Seattle skyline now occasionally displayed Etheria Prime's purple forests, creating a seamless blend of two worlds. Marcus, Zarathil called from their shared laboratory, which had expanded to occupy what used to be his spare bedroom. You need to see this. Marcus found his bonded partner hunched over a microscope, her 4 arms working with specimens, while her skin cycled through colors that indicated intense excitement. The sight still amazed him, even after 3 months of sharing daily life. The bonding connection had deepened gradually, allowing him to sense her emotional states even from different rooms, but he never tired of seeing her enthusiasm for their work. What did you find? He asked, moving to look over her shoulder at the microscope display. The extremophile bacteria from your Amazon samples, Zarathil said, her voice carrying harmonic overtones that indicated breakthrough excitement. When exposed to Etherian crystalline growth medium, they began producing compounds that should be impossible for carbon-based life forms. Marcus looked at the display, seeing bacterial colonies that glowed with the same light patterns he associated with Etherian technology.
They're photosynthesizing like your people do?
Not exactly. They're converting light into crystalline structures while maintaining their carbon-based biology. It's a hybrid process that suggests... Zarathil paused. Her skin shifting to colors Marcus had learned meant she was processing something significant. What? It suggests that the fundamental biological differences between our species might not be as absolute as we believed. These organisms are creating bridges between crystalline and carbon-based life systems. Marcus felt his own excitement rising both from his scientific training and through the bonding connection that let him experience echoes of Zarathil's discoveries. Could this apply to larger organisms? To us? Perhaps. The implications are, Zarathil stood to her full height, towering over Marcus, her crystalline skin now cycling through patterns of gold and silver that indicated both excitement and something deeper. Marcus, I believe we may be witnessing evolution in real time. The bonding process isn't just creating emotional connections between species. It may be creating biological ones as well. Before Marcus could respond, their communication system chimed with an incoming priority message. The wall display activated, showing confluence of tides, their bonding facilitator from 3 months earlier. Greetings, Marcus and Zarathil. I hope your bonding process continues successfully. Very successfully, Marcus replied, still processing the implications of Zarathel's discovery. What can we do for you? The Coalition Council has been reviewing the progress of Earth's integration, and your partnership has been identified as particularly significant. We would like to request your participation in a special project. Zarathel moved closer to Marcus, close enough that their constant low-level connection deepened into full sensory sharing. Through her perceptions, Marcus could sense underlying currents and confluence of tides communication that he would have missed on his own. What kind of project? Zarathel asked. Several bonded pairs from the first wave of Earth integrations have reported unusual phenomena. Enhanced abilities, shared knowledge that neither partner possessed individually, and in some cases, biological changes that suggest the bonding process is having effects beyond what our models predicted. Marcus felt Zarathel's excitement spike through their connection. We've been documenting similar observations in our research. Excellent. The Coalition would like you to lead a research team investigating these phenomena. The project would involve working with bonded pairs from multiple species to understand what appears to be an accelerated evolution process triggered by interspecies bonding. Where would this research take place? Marcus asked. Initially here on Earth, but eventually on Coalition research stations throughout the galaxy. You would be among the first humans to visit other Coalition worlds in a scientific capacity. Through their connection, Marcus felt Zarathel's response before she spoke. The opportunity represented everything they had both dreamed of professionally. A chance to study xenobiology and interspecies relationships on a scale neither had imagined possible. We accept, they said simultaneously, then looked at each other and laughed. Excellent. A research station will be established in Seattle within the month. You'll be working with teams from 15 different species, all bonded pairs who have reported similar phenomena. After confluence of tides ended the communication, Marcus and Zarathel stood in their laboratory, processing the magnitude of what they'd just committed to. Are you nervous? Marcus asked. Terrified and exhilarated simultaneously, Zarathel replied. You? Same. But also, Marcus paused, trying to articulate something he'd been feeling for weeks but hadn't found words for. I feel like this is what we were meant to do. Not just the research, but doing it together. Does that sound crazy? Zarathel's skin shifted to colors Marcus had learned meant deep affection. The bonding algorithm may have been more sophisticated than even the Coalition realized. Over the following weeks, as they prepared for the expanded research project, Marcus began to notice changes in himself that went beyond the emotional connection with Zarathel. His senses seemed sharper, particularly his ability to perceive light spectrums that had been invisible before. When he mentioned this to Zarathel, she revealed that she had been experiencing something similar, a growing sensitivity to chemical markers that was allowing her to analyze biological processes in ways that should have been impossible for crystalline-based physiology. The research station that materialized in downtown Seattle was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen, a crystalline structure that seemed to grow from the ground itself, reaching toward the sky in flowing organic shapes that somehow felt both alien and perfectly at home in the urban landscape. On their first day, Marcus and Zarathel met their research team. 7 other bonded pairs from different species combinations. There was Elena Rodriguez, a human marine biologist, bonded to Trilix, an insectoid being whose compound eyes could perceive time differentials. David Kim, a human physicist, had bonded with Luna Song, a gaseous entity that existed primarily in electromagnetic spectrums. Each pair had documented phenomena that challenged understanding of biology, physics, and consciousness. Welcome to Project Integration, announced Dr. Veltar, a tall being with skin that shifted between liquid and solid states, who served as the Coalition's lead researcher for the project. What we are investigating here may represent the next stage of evolution for all Coalition species. The first few weeks of research confirmed what Marcus and Zarathel had suspected. The bonding process was creating biological and neurological changes in both partners, allowing them to access abilities and perceptions that their individual species had never possessed. Humans were developing enhanced sensory capabilities, aliens were gaining new types of analytical thinking, and all bonded pairs were demonstrating problem-solving abilities that exceeded what either species could achieve alone. The implications are staggering, Elena Rodriguez said during one of their team meetings, her excitement visible through the way her bonded partner Trilix's wings shimmed in resonance with her emotions. We're not just forming social bonds between species. We're creating hybrid consciousness that combines the best abilities of different evolutionary paths. But why? Asked David Kim. Why would the bonding process trigger biological changes? Through their connection, Marcus felt Zarathel's answer before she spoke.
Because consciousness and biology are more connected than any of our species understood individually. When we bond deeply enough to share consciousness, our biology adapts to support the expanded awareness. Doctor, Valtar's form shifted to shapes that Marcus had learned indicated approval. This aligns with our preliminary findings. The bonding process appears to be triggering dormant genetic sequences in all species, sequences that may represent evolutionary potential that requires interspecies contact to activate. As weeks turned into months, the research team made discovery after discovery. They documented cases of bonded pairs developing entirely new sensory organs, sharing memories across species barriers, and even beginning to reproduce offspring that carried traits from both species despite biological incompatibility. But more than the scientific discoveries, Marcus found himself amazed by the depth of connection he and Zarathel had developed. The bond that had begun as diplomatic necessity had become something that enriched every aspect of his existence. Her curiosity enhanced his own research insights, her perspective on problems solved, challenges he would never have overcome alone, and her presence in his consciousness had become as essential as breathing. One evening, as they worked late in their shared laboratory analyzing data from the day's experiments, Zarathel stopped mid-sentence and turned to look at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Marcus, may I share something with you?" "Always." She extended her hands toward him, and when he took them, the connection that flowed between them was deeper than anything they had shared before. Instead of just emotional resonance or shared perceptions, Marcus found himself experiencing Zarathel's complete memory of their relationship from her perspective. He saw himself through her eyes on that first day at the integration center, nervous and resistant, but trying to be fair. He experienced her growing respect for his intelligence during their laboratory work, felt her surprise at discovering how compatible their thinking processes were, shared her wonder at the depth of connection they achieved during the bonding ceremony. But more than memories, he experienced the profound gratitude she felt for the way their partnership had transformed her existence. Through the bond, she had gained access to emotional experiences that crystalline-based life forms had never evolved, ways of processing information that had revolutionized her approach to research, and a sense of completeness that she had never known she was missing. When the sharing ended, Marcus found himself with tears in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For showing me how this looks from your side. For letting me understand how much this means to you." Marcus moved closer to her, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her crystalline skin. "I want to share something too." This time, Marcus initiated the deep connection, sharing his own experience of their relationship. His initial terror at losing his independence, followed by growing fascination with her mind and the way she approached problems. The moment during their first shared research session when he realized she understood his passion for biology in ways no human ever had. The profound relief of finding someone who celebrated his differences rather than merely tolerating them. And finally, the deep love he felt for her. Love that had grown from respect and compatibility into something that had fundamentally changed who he was as a person. When the connection ended, Zarathel's skin cycled through colors that told a story of joy, gratitude, and deep affection. "The algorithm was not sophisticated," she said softly. "It was miraculous." As they held each other in their laboratory, surrounded by evidence of evolutionary changes that were reshaping the galaxy, Marcus realized that their personal bond was part of something much larger. The Coalition's bonding protocol wasn't just maintaining peace between species. It was creating a new form of consciousness that combined the best aspects of different evolutionary paths, pushing all member species towards something greater than any could achieve alone. And at the center of it all were millions of pairs like them, beings who had chosen to love across the vastness of space and time, creating connections that were literally reshaping the biological and social future of the galaxy. Tomorrow would bring new discoveries, new challenges, and new opportunities to explore the implications of interspecies bonding. But tonight, in the quiet of their shared space, Marcus and Zarathel were simply two beings who had found in each other something neither had known they were looking for, and who were building together something that neither could have imagined alone. 2 years after their bonding ceremony, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the Coalition research station orbiting Kepler 442b, watching the sunrise paint the planet's 3 continents in shades of gold and amber. The station itself was a marvel of integrated architecture, built using techniques developed by bonded pairs who had learned to combine the engineering approaches of dozens of different species. Through the connection he shared with Zarathel, he felt her approaching before he heard her footsteps. The bond between them had deepened and evolved, becoming a constant background awareness that enriched rather than overwhelmed their individual identities. They could share thoughts and emotions instantly across any distance, but had also learned to maintain private mental spaces when needed. The council meeting results? Marcus asked as Zarathel joined him at the observation window. Unanimous approval, she said, her voice carrying harmonics of excitement and satisfaction. Project integration has been expanded to include all coalition worlds. Every species will establish research programs to study and facilitate the evolutionary changes we've documented. Marcus felt his own excitement rise to match hers. Over the past 2 years, their research had proven that the bonding process was indeed triggering dormant evolutionary potential in all coalition species. Bonded pairs consistently developed enhanced abilities that combined the best traits of their respective species, and their offspring carried genetic sequences that represented entirely new evolutionary pathways. More importantly, Zarathel continued, her skin shifting to colors Marcus recognized as deep satisfaction. The Council has approved our proposal for the Deep Space Exploration Initiative. This was the project they had been working toward for months. Using teams of bonded pairs whose combined abilities exceeded what any single species could achieve, the Coalition would begin systematic exploration of previously unreachable regions of space, seeking out new forms of life and potential new member species.
When do we leave? Marcus asked.
6 months. Time enough to complete the current research cycle and train the next generation of researchers. Zarathel moved closer to him, close enough that their bond connection deepened into full sensory sharing. Through her enhanced perceptions, Marcus could see the orbital station structure in spectrums of light invisible to human eyes alone, while she experienced the emotional satisfaction he felt at seeing their shared dreams becoming reality. "Dr. Chen, Doctor!" "Zarathel," came a voice behind them. They turned to see Dr. Velta approaching, their liquid-solid form currently configured for walking. Perfect timing. "I have remarkable news to share." "What kind of news?" Marcus asked. "We have received contact from a previously unknown species at the edge of Coalition space. They call themselves the Synthesis Collective, and their initial communications suggest they may be naturally bonded beings who evolved interspecies consciousness without Coalition intervention." Marcus felt Zarathel's excitement spike through their connection. The possibility of naturally evolved interspecies bonding had been theoretical until now. "What do we know about them?" Zarathel asked. "Limited information so far. They appear to be collective beings made up of multiple species working in permanent partnership. Their technology suggests abilities that match or exceed what our most successful bonded pairs have achieved." Dr. Veltar paused. Their form shifting to configurations Marcus had learned indicated something momentous. "They have specifically requested to meet with Earth's bonded pairs. They seem particularly interested in human-alien partnerships." "Why humans specifically?" Marcus asked. "Unknown. But their communications suggest they believe humans may represent a crucial development in interspecies evolution. Something about your species' adaptability and the way you form bonds." Marcus and Zarathel exchanged glances, sharing thoughts through their connection too complex for words. This was exactly the kind of discovery that their Deep Space Exploration Initiative had been designed to investigate. "We want to be part of the contact team," Marcus said. "I hoped you would. Your bonding represents one of our most successful human-alien partnerships, and your research experience makes you ideal candidates." Dr. Veltar's form shifted again, this time to shapes that indicated approval. "However, there is one complication." "What kind of complication?" "The Synthesis Collective is located in a region of space that requires a 6-month journey each way. The contact mission will require at least 18 months away from Coalition space." Marcus felt Zarathel's response through their bond before either of them spoke. The opportunity was exactly what they had been preparing for, a chance to study interspecies relationships on a scale that could transform understanding of consciousness and evolution throughout the galaxy. "We accept," they said simultaneously, then looked at each other and laughed at the synchronization that had become natural over their years together. "Excellent. The mission launches in 8 months. You'll have time to complete your current research and prepare for extended deep space exploration." After Dr. Velta left, Marcus and Zarathel returned to their shared laboratory, a space that had evolved to perfectly accommodate both their needs and working styles. The accommodation systems had learned to anticipate their research requirements, providing equipment and environmental conditions that enhanced both human and Etherian capabilities. 18 months in deep space, Marcus said, settling into his preferred analysis station while Zarathel began preparing biological samples at hers. "Together," Zarathel replied, the harmonic undertones in her voice indicating deep contentment. "Exploring unknown regions of space,
studying forms of consciousness we can barely imagine, pushing the boundaries of what we understand about life in the universe. Marcus smiled, watching her work with the fluid coordination of her forearms, her crystalline skin catching and reflecting the laboratory's varied light sources. When I was growing up, dreaming about becoming a xenobiologist, I never imagined anything like this. When I was young, studying carbon-based life forms from afar, I never imagined I would bond with one, much less explore the galaxy together. Zarathel paused in her work, turning to face him with an expression that combined affection with wonder. The algorithm that matched us may have changed the course of galactic evolution. Just the algorithm? Zarathel's skin shifted to colors Marcus associated with playful disagreement. The algorithm provided the introduction. What we built together was our choice. They worked in comfortable synchronization for several hours, their bond allowing them to coordinate research activities with an efficiency that amazed their colleagues. Marcus focused on analyzing genetic sequences from newly bonded pairs, while Zarathel studied the crystalline structures that were beginning to appear in some human partners. Occasionally, they would share discoveries directly through their connection, each gaining insights that their individual perspectives would never have achieved. As the station's artificial evening cycle began, they received an incoming communication from Earth. The wall display activated to show Marcus's sister Sarah calling from her home in Vancouver. "Hey, big brother." "And hello, Zarathel," Sarah said, waving at the screen. Behind her, Marcus could see her own bonded partner, a tall, plant-like being named Grove Singer, whose photosynthetic skin created beautiful patterns in response to emotions. "Sarah, how are you both doing?" Marcus asked. "Wonderful. Grove Singer's been teaching me about symbiotic agriculture, and I've been showing him human approaches to environmental restoration. We think we've developed techniques that could help restore damaged ecosystems on both Earth and his homeworld." Through his connection with Zarathel, Marcus felt her approval of Sarah's work. Bonding protocol had been as successful with his sister as it had been with them, pairing her environmental science background with Grove Singer's intuitive understanding of plant-based ecosystems.
That's fantastic.
We just received news that we've been selected for a deep space exploration mission. We'll be studying a species that may have naturally evolved interspecies consciousness. Sarah's eyes widened. That sounds incredible and dangerous. "All the best discoveries involve some risk," Zarathel said, her harmonic voice carrying reassurance. "We will be careful."
You better be.
"I'm not losing the best xenobiology team in the galaxy to some cosmic accident." Sarah's expression grew more serious. "Speaking of which, there's something Grove Singer and I wanted to tell you." Grove Singer moved into the communication frame, his bark-like skin shifting to patterns that Marcus had learned indicated important announcements. "We are beginning reproductive preparation," Grove Singer said, in the whisper-soft voice characteristic of his species. Marcus felt his excitement spike. "You're having a baby? The process is more complex for interspecies pairs," Sarah explained. "The accommodation systems have been working with our biology for months, creating conditions that will allow us to produce offspring that carries traits from both species. This will be the first human-plant hybrid offspring in coalition history," Grove Singer added, his skin patterns shifting to what Marcus recognized as pride and wonder. Through his bond with Zarathel, Marcus shared a fascination with the biological implications. Interspecies reproduction had been considered theoretically possible, but practically impossible until the bonding process began triggering genetic adaptations. "Congratulations to both of you," Zarathel said. "Your offspring will represent a completely new form of consciousness in the galaxy." After ending the communication with Sarah and Grove Singer, Marcus and Zarathel stood together on their laboratory's observation deck, looking out at the stars that would soon become their destination. "Do you ever think about reproduction?" Marcus asked quietly. Zarathel was silent for a long moment, her skin cycling through colors that indicated complex emotional processing.
I have wondered whether our biological differences make it possible.
Human Etherian pairings are rare, and the genetic requirements for successful interspecies reproduction are not yet understood. Would you want to try? Eventually? With you? Yes. Zarathel turned to face him, her 6 eyes focusing on him with the intensity that meant she was sharing complete honesty. But not until we understand more about what we would be creating. Our offspring would be unprecedented, carrying genetic sequences that could influence the evolution of both our species. Marcus took her hands, feeling the warm connection flow between them. "Whatever we decide together." "Always together," Zarathel agreed. Over the following months, as they prepared for their deep space mission,
Marcus and Zaratel continued to document the remarkable changes happening throughout Coalition space. Bonded pairs were developing abilities that exceeded the sum of their individual capabilities. Art, music, and literature were evolving in directions that no single species could have imagined. Scientific discoveries were accelerating as researchers combined different perspectives and ways of understanding reality. Most remarkably, conflict between coalition species had become virtually extinct. It was impossible to maintain hostility toward beings who were bonded to your extended family network. The web of interspecies connections had created a level of galactic peace that military force and diplomatic agreements had never achieved. On their final day before departure, Marcus and Zarathel visited Earth, spending time with Sarah and Grovesinger, who were now visibly expecting their hybrid offspring. They walked through the transformed city of Seattle, where architecture had evolved to accommodate dozens of different species, creating an urban environment more beautiful and functional than any single species could have designed. "Ready for 18 months in deep space?" Zarathel asked as they boarded the exploration vessel that would carry them to the edge of Coalition space. Marcus looked around the ship's bridge, where bonded pairs from 12 different species worked together with seamless coordination, their various abilities combining to create the most advanced exploration capability in galactic history. "With you, ready for anything." As their ship entered hyperspace, heading toward unknown regions of the galaxy where they would encounter beings who had naturally evolved what the Coalition was just beginning to understand, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed since that first day at the Integration Center. He had begun this journey believing that interspecies bonding was a political requirement he would have to endure. He had discovered instead that it was the key to unlocking evolutionary potential he had never known existed, both individually and as part of the larger galactic community. The algorithm had introduced him to Zarathel, but they had chosen to build something together that transcended what either could have achieved alone. Their love had become a bridge between worlds, their partnership a model for the future of consciousness in the galaxy. And as they headed into the unknown, connected by bonds that made them stronger than the sum of their parts, Marcus knew that the best discoveries were still ahead of them. The galaxy was vast, filled with forms of life and consciousness beyond imagination. But whatever they found in the depths of space, they would face it together. Two beings who had learned that the most profound connections transcend the differences between species, between worlds, and between the wildly different ways that life learns to think and love and dream among the stars.